You know, I often say that the AMOS conference week is when I get the most hugs of all year. So just having everybody come, you know, back, it's like a family reunion. It really is.
It absolutely is. Like, I agree. I've had as many hugs as I've had in the last few days. I've had probably almost all year, and it is a family. The fact that we were able to take this from a conference where we had a couple of hundred people, almost all of whom were specifically invited by us, to now that, you know, we send out a call for papers and we get so many responses. I guess the other thing is just the fact that when we started, we had to really look hard to find people for keynote speeches, and these days we don't have to go out looking for them. They're coming, knocking at the doors and saying, would you like to have me as a keynote speaker? Yes, sounds good.
Please welcome Scott Hunt, AMOS Site Technical Director, to the stage.
Wow, good afternoon. I promised I would keep this introduction clean. However, I can't guarantee that the next talk will not get a little bit colorful, given the passion of the presenter for the mission, and particularly since we'll have the opportunity to go off script and ask a couple of questions at the end. So Mrs. Barbara Golf is dual-hatted as the U.S. Space Force Strategic Advisor for Space Domain Awareness and the lead for the Commercial Integration Office at Space Systems Command. In these roles, she directs all aspects of space domain awareness activities to align the enterprise with integrating quickly into operations, and provides the unclassified entry point for space commercial capabilities for the U.S. Space Force. Barb earned a Bachelor's of Science in Physics from the United States Air Force Academy in 2003, and a Master's of Science in Physics from San Diego State University in 2009, where she authored the paper titled "Impact of Strange Quark Matter Nuggets on Pycnonuclear Reaction Rates in the Crust of Neutron Stars." She has assured me that she will not be talking about this topic today, but if you'd like to know more about the strange quark matter nuggets, please find her during the break. Following her work with neutron stars, Barbara joined the Space Superiority Systems Directorate Space and Missile Systems Center and spearheaded space kill chain analysis to assess end-to-end capabilities against multiple threat vignettes, laying the foundation for time-phased investments for 3 mission areas: space control, space situational awareness, and space battle management, command, control, and communications. She then moved north to Vandenberg to provide technical support for the developmental operations at the Joint Space Operations Center's Combat Operations Division, enabling response options to critical space events. Prior to her current position, Barbara played a critical role as the white cell lead and experiment controller during the stand-up of the Joint Interagency Combined Space Operations Center, and was an operations trainer and crew evaluator for National Space Defense Center. For those who knew her during that time, the early days of that effort, you may remember her using the phrase "running with scissors." I can assure you this was just a euphemism for taking risks, and she was very careful not to let us have any sharp objects on the ops floor. In the end, the risk-taking paid off, and the National Space Defense Center emerged. In her role at the National Space Defense Center, she created the Joint Commercial Operations Cell, establishing a global virtual space domain awareness operations center with commercial and allied partners. Barbara's presentation today is titled "Joint Commercial Operations Introduction and Way Forward." Please give a warm welcome to the charming and colorful Mrs. Barbara Golf.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was horrible. So you can put the bingo cards away. It's only 20 minutes. Oh, I hope. All right, so let's get into it. Next slide, please.
So what is this thing, the JCO, Joint Commercial Operations? It's a space domain awareness cell that we have had in operations for several years now, augmenting military space surveillance. We use a variety of different sensor types from our commercial providers. Electro-optical sensors, radars, passive RF, publicly available information, and we are moving into satellite information as well. We originally focused on protect and defend, feeding into the National Space Defense Center, but we have moved well beyond that. We'll be walking you through some of our new capabilities over the next several months and the past several months. This operations center is built entirely from US and allied partners. We'll walk you through what that looks like. In our mission operations, we are very good in GEO, not so good in LEO, we're fixing that, and moving out into XGEO as we're providing support and indications and warning to the NSDC and others. We do things like maneuver detection, launch tracking, and our primary report, our primary deliverable is called the NOTSO, Notice to Space Operators, very similar to a NOTAM, Notice to Airmen and Mariners. We operate at exclusively not classified. That's a weird classification term. What it means is we do not own this data. We license this data from our commercial partners and for data and analytical services. It is not only there's unclassified and there's not classified, and that's where we are. And so as a result, that data is shared across our partner nations and our users. We are moving into 24/7 operations next year. We're at 24/5 right now, and we do this in collaboration with our partners around the globe. Next slide, let's walk you through what that looks like. So this is a virtual operations floor, one of the silver linings of COVID. As you can see here, we have regions cut up by time zones. So America's cell runs for about 8.5 hours, including changeover. They completely roll over command and control to our Pacific cell partners who run operations for another 8 hours, and then completely roll over command and control to our Meridian cell partners in Europe, Africa, and the Central Asian nations. Our military and civilian government partners run command and control of the cell using a variety of different tools that we'll walk you through, and they are supported by our commercial partners who provide all of our data, all of our analytics, and all of our self-grading tools inside of operations. This data is coming, like I said, from commercial sensors and allied partners. The Unified Data Library is our backbone, operating at unclassified and then sending our data up to secret and top secret. And if you're not compliant with the Unified Data Library, we can't put you on contract. So highly recommend you go meet that team. The notices, the reports, go out to a variety of different operations centers and users. And again, we're looking at satellite tracking for anything that looks weird in space, and quite a few things do now. Maneuver detection, launch support, and we'll walk you through some new notices that we're providing these days. Next slide. Why do we need this thing? So what you see on the bottom left-hand side for you is the extremely exquisite and extremely expensive space surveillance network. You notice a lot of gaps. These are the best sensors in the world, bar none. Best sensors in the world, bar none. Expensive to make and expensive to deploy. So we do complement these exquisite sensors with very good capabilities, with a high capacity environment of commercial support that is spread around the globe. These are smaller sensors, not as exquisite, but when you have hundreds of these, this allows the military sensor network to focus in on very particular problems. When you have this many sensors, and this is just a snapshot in time, this is dynamically reallocated based on weather and upgrades and what have you from across our commercial providers, you can stare at things that are acting strangely. We do say if you drive it like you stole it, you have our full and undivided attention. We are not fed by intel. Your behavior, your activities are fully visible on orbit to the entire planet, and the JCO does provide that notification about your activities on orbit. Next slide. These are examples of our tool suites. These are used to wedge together or glue together our commercial provider analytics. These are just examples. You can globally accessible see our tool suites if you are trained at the right levels. A couple things to highlight. Our allied mission partners do use these tools from wherever they are on the planet. They're monitoring our revisit rates, seeing our data sets, looking at which sensors are up and down, scanning for any anomalies in GEO and LEO, and being able to provide notifications out to the globe. Next slide. And once folks go through training, they can get to our communications board. It is a fully virtual operations center. Folks always wonder where we are. The answer is wherever you can get to an internet connection, including airline Wi-Fi. We have done that in the air over Qatar. God bless United Airlines. But you can get to the crew logs of what's going on, watch their chatter. It is worse than me publicly speaking, so be careful in there. You can see the mission management boards as we're posting and processing events. You can get inside of our video comms and listen to the ops floor. And so this is how we're running operations day to day. Next slide. If you want to receive this, this is actually how you get to us. As I said, the notices to space operators include maneuver alerts, approach warnings, anything strange, weird, outside a pattern of life. If you want to see the chat channels, you can get to that too. So that registration link is live and active. You can get to 3 training videos, about a total of 90 minutes, walking through what these things are, what we do, what you can see. It is digital training updated semi-annually, and takes about 90 minutes total. And if you get stuck, our training team email is there at the bottom. You can also get the JCO weekly activity report as far as strange stuff that's happened on orbit. It's published every Sunday evening. So that's available to you as well. Next slide. And for partners, for folks that want to be part of the JCO, this is how you do this. So our training program is fairly extensive at this point. As I said, you can just look into the JCO and see it, see what's going on. All are welcome to do that inside of JCO 100. But if you are part of an operations center, like our commercial mission partners, or our allied partners, highly recommend you start looking at our more advanced training, which includes JCO 150. If there are particular tools that are interesting to you, including electromagnetic spectrum training or other training, and you want to focus in on how that could be made more useful for you, particularly in classified environments, we do this 150 series where we can provide focused attention for how to integrate that into your operations. If you want to be part of command and control, actually want to help run this operations center, you are welcome to join us. That is the JCO 200 series, where we train our partners across the globe to help us run this operation. It takes about 4 weeks. You give us training, or we give you training, you give us ops time. 90% of the manning of the JCO comes from our partners. I am the most overmanned unit in the Space Force because our partners are so generous. For other teams, if you're very good at training, we can put you into the Train the Trainer program. The Kiwis are awesome. So are the Brazilians and the Brits who help run the training program to, again, share the burden, share the wealth of how we do this across operations. And then again, for those who are part of high-value assets, both in the US and our allied partners, we have begun a low to high classified training program to prepare for nefarious activity on orbit. If you have any questions, the training team email is there. We'll get you aligned to the right teams. Next slide. This is who's part of the JCO as of, I think, earlier this week. So we have about 28 nations that are part of the JCO. 18 of them participate in some shape, form, or fashion in operations. But it does look like a mini UN. I think I'm going to give the UN a run for its money by the time we're done. But this is JCO Americas, JCO Meridian, and JCO Pacific. And you are welcome. You are absolutely welcome to join us. Next slide. This is how you do that. First thing you do is you reach out to that training team, say you're interested, and we will link you up to the appropriate operations integrators. I have teams that help onboard nations or partners into operations. We will ask you what your goals and objectives are, and it's okay to say, I don't know. This is a choose your own adventure, and it can be a meandering adventure when you're rolling in here. Every nation's been different. Every partner's been different. There is no standard way of doing this. So you can let us know what it is you're interested in, or just kind of watch and explore with us. We will do the coordination of how to coordinate across the U.S. government agencies that you might want to be involved with. We establish an onboarding plan, including adapting a training program for your needs, outlining the right tools and data sets of what you might require, and then get you into that training program I just outlined. This goes all the way up to and including creating space operations centers with you. If you want a national cell, we can help you learn how to make one. We have flyaway kits. We can drop one inside your country if you'd like, in order to give you a leg up of how to do this. Next slide. As I mentioned, these are examples of what some countries or partners have brought to bear inside of the JCO. Most people like providing crew. That's very helpful. This is a very big operation, and I'll show you how it's growing. But other teams bring in sensors, they bring in data, they bring in analytical services. Some of them, not all of them, want national cells. Really depends where you want this to go, and that's up to you. It's up to your national objectives. We're pretty flexible. Next slide. For commercial partners, if you want to bring in capabilities, a lot of folks ask me, hey, what happened to the SACTs, the Sprint Advanced Concept Training? These were live fire exercises that we ran 2 to 3 times a year. They didn't go away, they got faster. We now run them every Tuesday for 2 hours. Every Tuesday for 2 hours, focused in on partners and providers who are trying to bring capabilities into operations. This is how this is outlined. And many thanks to the COMSO team. This is the front door team at Space Systems Command. Mike Whalen, if you're out there, please stand up, raise your hand, and you are screwed. They are all coming after you, buddy. I did not swear on that one. I just said screwed. This is how we discover capabilities in operations. The COMSO team, the front door team, do a lot of that sifting for us. I think next week we are posting for the first time our mission essential tasks. This is what we're trying to do inside of the JCO. We're posting some of our gaps where we don't have commercial capabilities. Again, this is how you access the front door. This is how you submit a proposal. And our front door team will help sort that. They align the needs and then line you up into what's called initial capability screening, where we check, how real is this? I will say, unfortunately, some things are only PowerPoint deep. We do not buy you off of PowerPoint. Your data does have to go into the unified data library. We have to prove that we're capable of using it and ingesting it or aligning the tools accordingly, or we do not pull you into operations. We then set up an iterative capability testing in order to make sure things are working the way we need it to work. We set up a training program in verification prep to make sure that we can back train this across all of our crew members. And then we put you on contract and roll you into operations. Next slide. And this is how it's expanding. So like I said, we used to be just protect and defend. We're going way farther than that now. We do have a mandate to integrate commercial into operations. Now, operations is pretty big. So we have expanded as of the 1st of July into electromagnetic spectrum operations. I'll show you what that looks like. We are moving TAC SRT into operations on the 1st of October 2024. We have already begun prototyping and expanding into XGEO cislunar support. We're expanding our training program into high-value assets support and defense. And our goal is sometime next year or so, depending on how long CR lasts, we will try and be in 24/7 operations in 2025. I'll go into the details on these. Next slide. This is what we mean by electromagnetic spectrum operations. Spectrum situational awareness. This is an example when you have proliferated LEO satellites and they all have GPS receivers, you can make heat maps of EMI across the surface of the planet. This gives you a sense of what the pattern of life looks like in different bands. You can then look at those EMI sections and begin to geolocate and characterize EMI sources. So clearly something's going on in Ukraine right now. Next slide. Similar pieces, we are expanding this. This is not yet in operations, but it's inbound fast. We are expanding out of L-band into C, S, X, KU, and Ka bands over the next year in order to do something similar. Again, that sort of characterization and geolocation of threats on the ground and in space. Next slide. Here's what we do with that. Let's look at the graphic on the upper left-hand corner. So with our commercial partners, teams like the CIC, the Commercial Integration Cell, which is also under my purview now, let's say we have indicators of EMI from that commercial mission partner, goes into a particular format. In the UDL, we do some processing inside of the JCO in our 24-hour cycle. We provide a electromagnetic spectrum, not so saying, hey, here's about where this thing is, and what we characterize it as. This gives our partners an opportunity to mitigate mission impacts and work around the jammers. This gets to the real fighting SATCOM that we've been talking about for a while. But how do we mitigate those mission impacts? And the first key to mitigating mission impact is situational awareness. Next slide. TAC SRT, another piece, like I mentioned, moving in operations within the next 2 weeks. Many, many kudos to the space sensing PEO, Colonel Visosky and his team. They have been running a pilot program uphill into a headwind for quite some time, and we are moving that capability into operations. They use commercial imagery analytics in order to support high interest events, fleeting events like humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, and illegal resource extraction like illegal fishing, illegal mining, illegal logging. Using this entirely, again, from commercial capabilities on orbit. We are actually collaborating with the IC. We don't double buy. We check NGA imagery libraries first, make sure we don't already have information. We take everything we purchase and put it back in those libraries. So it is and can be a very fruitful collaboration. Next slide. These are examples of what those operational planning products can look like based on that commercial source of analytics support. This can include things like wildfire analysis, don't go this way, go that way, the bridge is down, the road is down, and provide that information completely shareable in a tactically relevant timeline for folks who need it quickly. This can also happen for earthquakes, floods, and others, and we're getting this information out to our Space Force components as quickly as we can. This will be in an 8x5 configuration on the 1st of October, primarily supporting Southcom. We're moving out to the other combatant commands over the next 3 months. Next slide. Cislunar operations, I do want to give a shout out to 19th Space Defense Squadron. Those guys are awesome, leaning forward into XGEO. They've leaned forward into how to use commercial, because there's just really not that much that's going to work when we're getting this far out. And so they've looked at, in experimentation with us, how to practice on launches that are going out there. There's a lot of adaptation that we need to do when we're dealing with how do you fuse data. When you're dealing with XGEO, how to use passive RF and electro-opticals. These are things that are hard to see, hard to hear. This is an enormous volume, and we are exploring that with 19th Space Defense Squadron. Next slide. As I mentioned, we're also doing the high-value asset support. This just started. Many kudos to the UK. There's nothing more fun about my job than beating up the Brits. So we started training with them for high-value asset support in August. We'll be going out to do our first live practice with them, low to high, in November. But many kudos to that team. They're always in the front. They're always in the front. They always punch above their weight. So we'll be working with them in order to work on what do we do about launches, what do we do about on-orbit maneuvers, and how might they be able to prepare. Next slide. Okay, I'm in the last 30 seconds. I think I made that. But this is just a brief summary of what we're doing inside of commercial operations. There is a new office. It's called the S4S SSC Commercial Integration Office, or the CIO. It owns both the JCO and the CIC, operating at multiple levels, and it is one of the routes by which we onboard commercial capabilities into operations, as we've been told to do. So I think at this point, I can open it up for questions.
Please submit your questions through the conference app or make your way to a microphone. I'll go ahead and start with a question here. What do you see as the appropriate mix of commercial SDA capabilities versus dedicated military systems?
That is very much an it depends. Let's put it this way, it is not a flat price answer. We are very much focused on how to get capability to operations quickly, but also how to make sure we're meeting the mission. The mission requirements are what they are. I get the question all the time of what's the commercial requirement. That is a ridiculous question. It is a mission requirement, and whatever it is that you're using, it's got to meet the mission. We don't get to lose wars. And so whatever it is we're using, one of the reasons we do this sort of live testing, one of the reasons we do this sort of live practice is because we have to make sure that what it is you're doing is getting up to standard. We love how fast you produce. We love how fast you generate. But our missions keep expanding. Our requirements keep rising because it's not static. We're all evolving. Red's evolving too, and they get a vote. So the mix is whatever we can get in within the budget lines. Those budget lines are growing, but we're balancing speed and performance, and that's what we're focused on.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Barb.
No problem.